Guys, please give it up for Francesca Lombardo.
Hello, thanks for being here today. And as Simone said, the book is called Beatrice and the London Bus, and it's coming out. It's out in 2 weeks. It's published by Daily Fairy Tales, and is out in 2 weeks on Amazon print ebook edition. And it's a story of Beatrice. She's an 8-year-old girl. She dreams of becoming a bus driver, and she meets a very, very special bus. It's a roadmaster bus, and this is the roadmaster bus, the 168 by Waterloo, and this is Beatrice. And this bus has a special thing. He can talk, but only special people can hear him, and she's one of them. So the chapter I'm going to read today is called The Magician with 1,000 Hats, and is the first chapter of book number 3, and this is the cover number 3. It is called The Conquest of London. So Beatrice is sailing on the bus. Okay. The Magician with 1,000 Hats. The last time we saw Beatrice in the London bus, the two friends had escaped from the madness of Hampton Court, as the old palace had trapped the bus in its main entrance, frightening it to death. Terrified by that turn of events, the bus swore that it was never, but ever going to drive into a building ever again, not even if the Queen of England itself would send him an invitation to Buckingham Palace. And guess what? Exactly the next day, the bus received a letter. An invitation, precisely. Can you imagine who sent it? Nothing less than the great Queen of England. The Queen of England, a very fun-loving lady who loved buses just as much as Beatrice, had heard of a lot of the bus 168 by Waterloo, the last roadmaster in the world who was only friends with the brave and the bold. And more recently, about his little friend, Beatrice. She really wanted to meet the very famous roadmaster bus, but somehow she never had the chance. She also had a secret dream which had never come true, despite the fact that she was the most famous, most respected and powerful queen in the world. Plus, the queen had never confessed that dream to anyone, not even to her beloved palace, Buckingham Palace, or Bucky as she affectionately called him. Bucky was the queen's best friend. The queen and the palace enjoyed long, interesting and fun afternoon chats together, generally when a large crowd of helpers was not around, because they didn't know that Bucky was a talking palace. But the queen wasn't often completely alone, and soon her helpers began thinking that the queen had gone mad. "He's a very special bus, ma'am," explained Bucky as the two were chatting one afternoon when everyone was busy in the palace with chores and other stuff. "His wisdom has no equal," Bucky continued. "He knows everything about London. He knows loads of fun stories about the present and the past. He also speaks all languages of the world." "All languages?" asked the Queen with great curiosity. "Yes, ma'am, all languages, dialects and slang from every part of the world and every corner of the United Kingdom," Bucky explained. "What kind of British dialects and slang does the bus speak?" the Queen asked in a quivering voice. "All of them, ma'am. Mancunian, sauce, Brummie, Cockney, chaff," continued Bucky. "Chaff?" the Queen interrupted him, opening eyes very wide. "Yes, ma'am, chaff," replied the Queen, surprised that the Queen would know what that was. "Very well," the Queen said. She picked up a bell, called a personal butler, and arranged for a royal invitation to be sent to the 168 by Waterloo and his little friend Beatrice for tea and tiramisu at Buckingham Palace. "Tea and tiramisu, ma'am?" asked the personal butler, surprised. "What about finger sandwiches and scones?" "You heard me. Tea and tiramisu," answered the Queen firmly. "I want plenty of tiramisu." The Queen had just found out that the bus was crazy about the Italian dessert, and she dismissed the butler with a little wave of her hand. Meanwhile, the day after the Queen's chat with Buckley, Beatrice went to see her friend, the London bus, right after school. "Beatrice, you will not believe this. Look, a royal invitation!" exclaimed the 168 by Waterloo, his eyes fixed on the elegant royal card he was holding with his foldable metallic hands and arms the bus had decided to use that day. This is the royal invitation card. A royal invitation, asked Beatrice as she stared at the card. Yes, Beatrice, a royal invitation at Buckingham Palace for the two of us, with the Queen, the Bass repeated loudly. Mr. Cecco gave it to me. He said he couldn't believe his eyes when the elegant card with the royal crest and signature of the Queen of England was delivered to him. Oh, Beatrice, we're going to drive into Bucky to meet the Queen. Can you believe it? Asked the 168 Waterloo in a surprised but proud and pompous voice. But 168 Waterloo, you just said that you were never going to drive into the building ever again, not even if the Queen of England herself invited you personally. Beatrice reminded him, perplexed. Yes, I know I said that, but the Bast replied, slightly embarrassed, not knowing what to say next. Beatrice looked at him puzzled. And what if Bucky's going to trick you and trap you like Hampton Court? She said with a genuine concern. And what if the Queen of England is just as mad as King Henry VIII? The girl insisted, no longer believing in any royal invitation that was coming that way. After the Bass had told her that the very famous King's invitation at court wasn't real, she had become very cautious. Oh no, Beatrice, Bucky's my friend. He would never do that. And if the Queen of England sends an invitation with a royal crest on it, signed personally by herself, it can only mean one thing. A real royal invitation, he reassured her. And no, she's not mad, he added. But there's a problem. What's that? Asked Beatrice. It's my size, explained the Bass. I won't be able to drive into Buckingham Palace. I am too big. Beatrice thought hard for a few seconds, scrubbed her eyes, wrinkled her nose and scratched his tips, trying to come up with an idea to solve the problem as usual. There's only one solution, carried on the Bass, who's also been thinking long and hard. I need to be resized. Resized? Yes, we need to visit the magician with 1,000 hats. He performs by the river at the South Bank on the other side of the Palace of Westminster near the London Eye. He creates hats of all shapes out of the infinite nothingness, so he says, and he resizes them on the spot. I don't know if he has ever resized them, remarked the Bass. We must give it a try, said the Bass. Yes, announced Beatrice, now all excited at the idea of meeting a magician. We must try for the sake of the Queen of England, the best and the most famous queen in the world, whose face I drew on my £500 note. She gushed, now liking the idea of another royal invitation. Hopefully a real one this time. The next Sunday, the day of the royal invitation at the palace, the two friends drove towards the river first, where the magician with 1,000 hats was performing and was now showing his hat, making resizing magic skills. As the two friends reached the Jubilee Garden, a lush green park built to celebrate the 60 years of the Queen sitting on the throne, Beatrice had another close-up glimpse of the London Eye, which was majestically towering over the River Thames with all her gigantic beauty. The Brewmaster Bus, who had a soft spot for the giant wheel, glanced up to see if by any chance she had spotted him. She had not. He was quite of a shy Buzz, and at the sight of so much beauty, he blushed and became much redder than he was. As every Sunday, the South Bank was very busy. Countless performers were dancing, singing, juggling, riding on unicycle, impersonating living statues, throwing things around and catching them again, and sometimes not. The place looked like an open-air circus. Finally, the 168 Waterloo spotted the man they were looking for, the magician with 1,000 hats. The magician had a stretchy neck, very large round eyes that looked like they were about to fall out of sockets at any time, and a long aquiline nose and a mouth that looked like an ironing board. He was wearing a shiny suit, he had a long jacket, and which he was an underkift on top of which he kept using to dry bits of sweat from his forehead, and large trousers. He had numerous hats on his head, one on top of the other, one around his neck and a few around his ankles, and some stitches on the jacket. And this is the magician with 1,000 hats. And a few around his, and some stitches in his jacket. He was also juggling some hats with his hands and had a few tiny little ones on top of his feet. And more were displayed on the pavement around him. Hello, magician with 1,000 hats, said the Brewmaster as he drove up to him. Oh, look at here, the ones who save at Waterloo. The very last masters in the world is only friends with the brave and the bold. How wonderful, marvelous, and astonishingly outstanding is to see you, he replied, in a tone that was suggesting it was making fun of him. Yes, wonderful to see you too, replied the boss. So what brings you here? Have you made up your mind about changing that old-fashioned bowler hat for something more trendy? He said, looking at him with a sly grin. Well, no, actually, I'm going to keep this one, thank you very much, the boss replied. Beatrice, who was still sitting in the driver's seat of the bus, was spellbound at the sight of the magician's crazy hat. She had never seen so many hats with so many interesting and bizarre shapes, colors, creation, and decorations. One hat had a giant spider's web on top with a fly stuck in it, a sight which had terribly frightened the annoying ugly fly who had followed them all the way to Southbank that day. Another hat instead was decorated with a mouse stuck inside a holy cheese. Another one had a big giant elephant on top of it with very long sticky legs. There was also a hat in the shape of a giant hag, like the hag that she had put on the 500 pounds note she had drawn. On top of the hag hat, there was another little hat on the shape of a fry pan. In comparison, her woolly hat was very, very boring indeed. Perhaps your little friend wants a brand new hat, asked the magician when he spotted the little girl in the driver's seat. Beatrice shook her head, although she would have loved to see what kind of a hat he would have come up with for her. No, thank you, replied the master boss. So what can I do for you if it's not a hat? Asked the magician with a sly, ironing board smile. Magician, I need to be resized, exactly 3 sizes down from what I normally am, said the 168 by Waterloo with a frown. Resized? Why? Have the roads of London shrunk? He burst into a laugh with his neck jerking and looking as if he was about to break in two. Magician, there's nothing to laugh about, said the boss, feeling resented. The Queen has invited me for tea, and I cannot possibly drive into Buckingham Palace this size. Tea with the Queen? Repeated the magician, astonished and outstanding. Oh, how did you manage that? The magician asked, still incredulous. He had been trying to get an invitation by the Queen for years, with no success, of course. Well, she likes from master bosses, you see. Oh, yes, of course. Well, I should be very honored to resize you for such an important event. Let's get to it. The tin magician abruptly dropped all his hats on the pavement, picked up his old brown suitcase, and took out a tiny goblet containing a smoking liquid. It spilled a few drops onto his hand, and then stayed still for a few minutes with his eyes closed. Then he opened them and stared intently into the master's eyes and said the magic phrase, Abradi, Abrada, Abrado, and I'll give you the size you want. As the magician was working on this magic spell, Beatrice hopped off the bus to look closely at his friend. 168 by Waterloo instead was now shaking and he had squeezed his glazed eyes so tight, unsure what to expect next. When the bus opened his eyes again, he didn't feel much had happened. Beatrice looked at him and shook his head, and yes, absolutely nothing had happened. Mr. Magician, the 168 by Waterloo hasn't shrunk. It's still the same size, said Beatrice, speaking to the man for the first time. Really? The magician replied, pretending to be surprised. Okay, let me try again. Abradi, abrada, abrado, and I'll give you the size you want. This time the magic spell had worked. The 167 Waterloo was now shrinking, but slowly losing his own shape, the shape of a bus, and was turning into a small pyramid, but upside down. Oh, exclaimed Beatrice, covering her face with her hands. What's happened to me, Beatrice? Asked the boss, who did feel smaller and was now seeing everything the other way around. You are fine, 168 Waterloo. Do not worry, she replied, trying to reassure him. Then she turned towards the magician and whispered, Mr. Magician, the 168 Waterloo is not longer a master boss. The magician knew he was in trouble. Beatrice, would you like to be resized too? You're quite tiny for your age. I can certainly make you 3 inches taller, at least. He asked, trying to distract her from his disastrous spell. No, thank you. I'm fine the way I am, Beatrice replied sensibly. Okay, uttered the magician with a proud grin, but you see, the 168 by Waterloo is now the shape of a very famous Egyptian pyramid, one of the oldest construction in the world. I don't want to be one of the oldest construction in the world, I want to be myself, only smaller, screamed the 168 by Waterloo, now worry sick. Okay, no need to worry, said the sloppy magician, grinning even more nervously. I shall try again. Abradi, abrada, abrador. Here's the shape, you should go. This time, the 168 by Waterloo turned into a giant red hat, even bigger than his normal master size, but so big that a big crowd of people started gathering around them. Oh, exclaimed Beatrice. The magician noticed immediately that his magic spell had gone wrong again, but like every great magician would do, he decided to make the most of it and announced roundly to the large crowd. The crowd, ladies and gentlemen, here's my latest hat creation, the giant Master Bus hat. The crowd went berserk and started clapping enthusiastically. Some were throwing coins into the magician collecting hat. Some were cheering. Why am I, Beatrice? Why is everyone looking at me and screaming at me? Asked the boss, now petrified with fear. Don't worry, 168 by Waterloo. You're not quite being precise, but we're getting close to it, she reassured. She then turned to the magician. Mr. Magician, the 168 by Waterloo doesn't want to be a giant hat. All he's asked for is that you make him small enough to drive through the doors of Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. He did not ask you to change his shape, she whispered nervously but firmly. I know, I'm doing my best, but it's not easy, replied the magician. One thing is resizing hats, quite another one is resizing buses. All right, well, let me try again. Now the magician looked as if he had fallen into a deep trance and started shaking. But things got even worse for the bus, because the 168 by Waterloo began changing into many different shapes, but so fast it was difficult to figure out in which object it had turned into. However, looking harder, you could see that it was turning into a portable suitcase, a small fry pan, then a shoes, and a wine glass, an iron, a hammer, and all this red and shining, and with a red 168 by Waterloo tag on top, but none of them was a master bus. Something seems to have got terribly stuck in the magic spells mechanism, and the whole transformation thing was spinning out of control of the magician with 1,000 hats. Feeling more and more embarrassed, the sloppy magician tried to regain the control of the situation one more time, as every great magician would. Oh, but this is so just wonderful, marvelous, astonishingly outstanding, he cried, launching his ironing board mouth into a wide, slight smile. What is wonderful, Mr. Magician? Asked Beatrice, more worried than ever about his friend's bizarre transformation. Beatrice, the crowd has gone crazy over the wonderful performance your friend is putting on. Can't you see that I turned him into the star of the South Bank? And he's now famous, the magician announced, rubbing his hand with glee and tried again to make the most of the sorry situation and of the large crowd, of course. But, Mr. Magician, the 168 by Waterloo is already famous, replied Beatrice, looking at him suspiciously. Oh, but he can be even more famous now, replied the magician. He doesn't want to be more famous, I'm sure of that, insisted Beatrice. My little girl, you have a lot to learn, don't you? Everyone in the world wants to be famous, and the ones that are already famous, all they want is to be even more famous, give enough chance. And I'm giving your friend this wonderful, marvelous, astonishing, outstandingly chance. Beatrice stood there in silence for a bit. She looked at the very tall and thin man with more curiosity. Perhaps the magician was right. Maybe the boss wasn't happy with being just famous, and he wanted to be even more famous. Perhaps the 168 by Waterloo was indeed pleased to be cheered so affectionately by such a large crowd of people, she thought. The trouble was that Master Boss had gone to sleep, and was now snoring, worn out by the effort of continuously changing shape, which meant just one thing. she couldn't ask him. All right, but what are we supposed to do now? Beatrice asked. Well, it's very simple, the magician replied. He picked up in full transformation mode, the 168 by Waterloo, put it on a tray and handed it to Beatrice. Just walk around, my dear, and show it to the crowd, he said. And don't forget to smile, he announced, a wide grin stamped smile on his thin, bony face. Beatrice started walking around with the tray as she was told. People started clapping and cheering even more loudly and throwing more coins into the tray. The crowd had gone wild at the bus performance, and Beatrice actually began to enjoy the attention she was getting. But one coin hit the in full transformation mode bus really hard and woke him up. Suddenly, 168 Waterloo saw Beatrice towering over him like a giantess. He was terribly scared and confused. What's going on? Good Lord, what on earth are you doing, Beatrice? Speak now, or forever remain silent. And please don't stop this nonsense at once, he shouted. But his voice was so tiny, feeble, and squeaky that Beatrice couldn't hear him. The only one who could hear the bus was the annoying ugly fly. Help was needed. Suddenly, the fly gathered all her strength. She flew at Beatrice as fast as a racing car and crashed into the tiny girl's forehead. And guess what? Nothing happened. Beatrice didn't notice a thing. Instead, she kept exhibiting and showing the 168 by Waterloo on the tray to the exciting crowd. I need an emergency plan, thought the annoying ugly fly. She buzzed around the little girl more frantically, bumping from her nose to her head, then to her forehead, all the way back again. I could sting her, but how? I'm not a bee, I'm just an annoying ugly fly, the fly thought. There was only one thing left to do. The annoying ugly fly threw straight into Beatrice's face and beat her nose with a little sharp, ugly teeth. Oh! cried Beatrice, dropping the tray on the pavement and covering her bitten nose with her hands while the bus fell off the tray. As the 168 by Waterloo hit the ground, the frantic transformation suddenly stopped, and the faulty magician's spell mechanism was somehow magically fixed. The 168 by Waterloo went back into his master shape, exactly 3 sizes smaller, as she asked in the first place. Beatrice, he said in his voice back to normal, but still shaky, what were you doing with me on a tray? I was showing you around to the crowd. Mr. Magician said you would want to become even more famous, she explained in a tiny voice and not quite sure whether she had done the right thing. I'm famous enough, and that's already enough to handle, snorted the 168 by Waterloo in disapproval, giving the magician with 1,000 hats a hard stare. I came here to be resized, not to become more famous, he added. Beatrice realized the magician had tricked her, and she gave him a dirty look. At first, the magician pretended not to be there. Then he decided again to make the most of the situation. Oh, but that's wonderful, awesome, outstanding. Look at yourself, 168 by Waterloo, he said. I've managed to make you exactly the right size, and now you can drive into Buckingham Palace and meet our great queen. See it for yourself, he said, holding a mirror in front of the 3 times smaller master bus. 168 by Waterloo looked at himself in the mirror with great apprehension. All right, Mr. Magician, all right. The bus was relieved to see that the magician was right, finally. But Beatrice knew the magician was taking credit for something that happened only by chance. But she was pleased that eventually it all turned out okay. The annoying ugly fly was relieved too and went to rest right on top of the master flat's roofed head. But before you go, my dear friends, announced the magician, I must warn you. This sight will only last for a couple of hours, exactly 2 hours after you met our great queen. You will go back into normal size. So, 168 by Waterloo, make sure you left Buckingham Palace by then. Thank you, I will, said the master bus with a bit concerned by the news. And please allow me to offer my homage to the Queen, should you be so kind as to take it to her. I've been trying to make her wear one of my hats for years, unsuccessfully. And this is my very best creation hat. I'm sure she will like it, he said the magician, handing to Beatrice a large, light pink hat box. His iron-board grin went from one side of his thin face to another one. Beatrice took the hat box and opened it. Then the master bus and hat took a peek inside and exchanged puzzled glances. "I hope she liked it," said the 168 by Waterloo, arching both his eyebrows. "I hope too," replied Beatrice with a concerned look. She hopped back on the bus, on the resized driver's seat, which was now too small for her, and the pair of friends drove off to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. And this is the end of chapter 1 of the book 3. Thank you, and this is a little other images that I didn't show you, and now I have some handouts for the children that are here, and then for them, and then so they can color. And if you want to find out about when it's coming out, it should be coming out in 2 weeks. You can find Beatrice and London Bus on Facebook. There is the fan page, and it'll be also if you like the fan page, and you see all the updates from there. Thank you very much.